It's Spanish Grand Prix week, and in the Formula One calendar that means getting your eyes on the pit lane and the garages on Thursday and Friday and looking at who's brought the most upgrades to their cars. A brilliant way to start the traditional European season, and we're going to look at which teams we expect to see making a real difference or trying to turn their fortunes around at Barcelona as F1 returns to where it went to pre-season testing. I've got Scott Mitchell and Jake Boxall-Legge with me to discuss what we should be looking out for. And JBL, let's start with Ferrari. Not necessarily a car where we're looking for a big upgrade package in Spain, but what are we looking to see from the team when they get back to a track where they look very good in pre-season?
The thing is, they've got to address quite a lot of things under the skin. It's all very well bolting on upgrades and stuff, but they've identified that they've got more of a mechanical problem, turning those tyres on, getting the maximum amount of grip out of them, and being able to carry that forward through the entire race weekend. That's the issue that they're having at the moment. And so they could chuck on tiny little bits of aerodynamic appendages and try and draw a little bit more out of the tyres that way. But when there's like a fundamental problem with the car, with perhaps how the suspension's set up or something like that, that's a deeper issue that the team has to go into. So you don't expect to see too much upgrade-wise externally in Barcelona. It's all about understanding that car, because it's rapid. It's just they can't get it to work for some reason, and they need to work out what that disconnect is, and they need to do it sooner rather than later as well, because Mercedes is looking pretty imperious at the moment.
Scott, let's move slightly further down the field. In fact, further than we would expect to go down the field to talk about these two teams, Haas and Renault. We were expecting these two to be fighting it out for fourth place, best of the rest really, behind the top teams, but most weekends, these two cars and their drivers have looked all at sea. What is going on with Haas and Renault, and what can we expect in Barcelona? Are either team talking about upgrades?
Well, a cynic would say that the Ferrari is struggling to get the most out of its tyres, so is it much of a surprise to see the Ferrari B car struggling to get the most out of its tyres? That would be a very oversimplified way of looking at it. These two cars are meant to be the fastest in the midfield, and they were in testing, and they more or less have been in the first few races if everything worked perfectly. But the really weird thing and the confusing thing for both of them is that they seem to be really struggling to extract the most from the tyres. On the Haas side, it appears to be that they once the tyre starts to grain, they can't get out of that graining phase, and no matter what they do, it just doesn't seem to work. So they're really struggling in colder temperatures. So, get back to Barcelona where they know the circuit, and it should be a bit warmer once we move into the middle part of the season. That should sort of be fixed by itself. But in F1, you can't rely on it being fixed by itself. And it's the same with Renault. They were nowhere in Azerbaijan, and they just seem to be lost as to why. They had to change their setup quite dramatically overnight from Friday to Saturday in Baku because of how they'd misjudged their aero package. So everything is clearly not right at either team, and I think we'll see upgrades on both cars. But again, it's drilling down into that understanding. The way it's been put to me is it's a really simple way of looking at it, and it's not meant to sound patronising, but you just look at this picture, and it's all well and good when you've got intricate aerodynamic detail on all of these cars, but the bit that's on the track are these big black things, and if you can't get those to work properly, then everything that you've got here is irrelevant. And that's the thing. These two teams are probably the worst at the moment on the grid for actually understanding the tyres and getting the most out of them.
Yeah, and obviously one of the things Haas keeps saying is that they're kind of hoping that the high energy corners, I think that was the phrase they used, of Barcelona will bring them back into that tyre performance window. Now let's talk about a more positive story, and that's the way things have started off for Racing Point. Not necessarily because the team arrived at the start of the season with a fully developed 2019 car after all of its problems last year, but it's managed to do what Force India always used to do, which is bag points and just always get the maximum result possible, it seems. Can we expect, though, to see that the team's new investment and new ownership that is piling in some money, can we expect to see some results from that in Barcelona and perhaps start to see new bits appearing on here for Giorgio Piola to take pictures of and for JBL to talk about?
Yeah, I think this team's going to give you quite a lot to work with actually in Spain. I'm really excited actually to see what these guys come up with, because I don't think we're going to get a B-spec car. I remember, I think it was a few years ago, they'd had real financial restraint at the start of the season. They'd not started the year with what they wanted. And by the time they got everything, that was effectively a B-spec. And not to the same degree now. They had a big upgrade package in Australia, I think it was, for the season opener after that vanilla car that we had in pre-season testing. And that sort of worked, but didn't. It took them a lot of time to optimise it. And they've had their low downforce package for Baku now, but they've been talking up their Barcelona upgrade quite a lot. So I'm excited to see what they've got, because you're right. What they've done on track is exactly what Force India was so good at, that maximising every opportunity and doing a very, very good job with not a lot. So they've clearly got the on-track efficiency that the team was famous for before it had money. So now let's see if they've sort of retained that efficiency when it comes to designing and producing top quality components, because if they can translate that with more money, more resource and the production of more components, then their upgrade package should be amazing. It's very difficult to bolt on a significant set of upgrades and immediately make it work, isn't it? And then sort of have that success, or the wind tunnel numbers turn into tenths of a second on the racetrack. So maybe Barcelona won't be an immediate transformation into the clear fourth fastest car or something like that, but I think they should definitely be aiming to be both cars in Q3. Lance Stroll certainly needs to get out of Q1, and then I think from Barcelona onwards, I think we'll see this team really start to kick on merit, not just through plucky performances.
JBL, don't worry, not going to ask you to explain Red Bull's suspension again. We've already done that in a different video. But do we think we'll see much in the way of upgrades on the rest of the car from Red Bull when we get to the Spanish Grand Prix?
Well, they've already said, and you've written a news article about this, it's only going to be subtle upgrades for Barcelona. It's not going to be the usual, okay, we've done some races, let's throw everything at this. It's just going to be taking what they've got, adding a few tweaks, might be track specific, might be, okay, we've identified an issue here and there, so they can take their development forward. They've already done quite a lot with that car, especially in terms of the front wing. There's been, I think there's about 3 iterations of the front wing already this season. They're trying, I think they're looking more towards the Mercedes model of just this marginal gains, just keep it going, identify a small problem, fix that, and just keep building that momentum. I think that's defined this upgrade package. Everybody, when it comes to Spain, usually has that as their sort of marker in mind, and they'll develop a package for that. But I think Red Bull have just decided to, again, go for that Mercedes model, just keep pushing what it can do with that car. It's looking very, very good at the moment. It's a good car, but yeah, it just needs a little bit more, but I think that's what they're going to try and do with it.
Scott, let's finish off with a team and a car that hasn't been looking good up to now, and this image probably sums up how Williams feels about the start of its season. It's been a really difficult time since the winter. You know, this was hardly a surprise to the team when they ended up with the slowest car on the grid at the start of the season. Where are Williams at now, and is there any hope there basically for the team and its fans that perhaps things can start to turn around?
Well, I think the main thing is move away from this sort of controversial Tech Pro bolt-on that Robert Kubica tried in Baku.
Quite draggy.
Obviously, that didn't work well. Well, I don't know. The current car's already pretty draggy as it is, so maybe if they were carrying that down the straight, it wouldn't really have made much of a difference to their competitive prospects. I think now, there has been light at the end of the tunnel for Williams for a while, but it's been so far in the distance, it's kind of like, oh, well, what's the point? It's still pretty damn dark around us. But what they've done now, they've finally been able to work through the pain of redesigning and manufacturing parts for legality purposes at the start of the year, and then building enough spares. We've heard Robert Kubica especially complaining at several times at the start of the season that they just haven't got that many spares, so they have to be careful. So I'm guessing this probably didn't win him many friends at Grove. Certainly the people that have been working really, really long shifts there to get to where they are now. And what they've done is they've finally got through that. Obviously, again, George Russell's weird drain crash in FP1 in Baku didn't help. That's another big setback. But they should finally be at the point where the manufacturing side of the business is now focused on producing upgrades. So they've had designs, they've had this idea of, okay, we need this to improve the car, or try and move this forward, or develop this because it was undercooked in pre-season with the launch model, blah, blah, blah. But they've just not been able to do it. It's basically been sat there on the shelf. They can't actually sort of it can't progress in the queue because it's just this logjam in development. And they've finally got to the point, I believe, where they can actually start manufacturing bits to go on the car and make it faster, not just make it legal or make it go around the circuit. So this is this isn't the beginning of a sudden charge back into the points for Williams this season. It rose a lot longer than that. It's going to be a very tough journey, but I think this is the start. This is the start of the turnaround. This is where they start to actually sort of validate some of the options that they've got, and they start to sort of combine the 2019 development with 2020. I've got the feeling that what we see, if we see anything in Barcelona, which I think we will see some small pieces. Barcelona and beyond that, I think we're going to start to see evolutions of stuff that Williams is hoping it can carry over into 2020, because let's face it, 2019 is a write-off, and the hard work for next season will have begun already.